So, project manager, you've defined everything you need to do in the scope statement, and you have your high-level, user-friendly work breakdown structure and activity list. But there's still a lot you don't know yet. In particular, you don't know how long these tasks will take, what order they will be performed in, which of the tasks can be completed independently, which require other activities to have already been completed, and which can be carried out in parallel with others. That's what the next few lessons will be focusing on: timelines and schedules. There is a logical process the project manager should follow when planning timelines and schedules. First, they should estimate the durations of each activity or task. They should add buffers, then sequence the tasks, and finally, they will be ready to build the project timeline. Pretty logical, right? Now let's break these down. So, estimating the durations of activities to achieve the deliverables. There is no one way of approaching this, but here is some best practice advice. The project manager needs to estimate how many hours, days, weeks, months, or even years an activity will take. She or he can and should use the experts in their team to get the most accurate estimates possible, but it is ultimately their responsibility to make the final decision. They are, after all, the person accountable for the project's success. With that said, the project manager will often not take what her or his team says as the undeniable truth, without proofreading it first at least. So I bet you're wondering, but why even ask them in the first place if you're just going to estimate a different time? Well, let's look at an example. Meet Jimmy. Jimmy's manager asked him to estimate how long he takes to get from his home to the office in the morning. He has worked here for a while and always leaves his home at 8:30, so he answers confidently, half an hour. His manager asks him to go into more detail. Jimmy answers that it can take up to 40 minutes when the traffic is bad, but when there's none, he can make it to the office in 20. He considers these to be the minimum and the maximum amount of time it will take him, making 30 minutes the average, and therefore the most likely time he will arrive. Jimmy's idea of his journeys to work looks like a bell curve, or the normal distribution. His manager doesn't really think Jimmy's estimation is completely accurate, so he asks Jimmy to help him with a little experiment. Every day over the next week, Jimmy must record the minute of departure from his home and of his arrival to the office. Once the data is collected and reviewed, something quite interesting comes to light. Jimmy is not quite the punctual employee he thought he was. In fact, he made it to the office in less than 30 minutes only once. The data showed that on average, Jimmy takes 34 minutes to reach the office, over 10% his estimate. You had better start setting your alarm a little earlier from now on, Jimmy. Now, this is an example of what we call planning fallacy, and we are all susceptible to it. So next lesson, we'll discuss what exactly the planning fallacy is, why it occurs, and what good project managers do to counteract it. Awesome.